This is Casual Babble.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the show. My name is Babbles and this is Casual Babble, your delve into the culture of the young professional and the entrepreneur, and your location for landscape news on the entrepreneurial and business sphere. And today we will have our second iteration of our entrepreneur spotlight with Alan Halas. Before we hop into that though, let's get some business news, and this of course will come from the Morning Brew, one of our favorite newsletters. Currently not sponsored, but Morning Brew, let's talk about it because we love you. All right, hopping into this latest edition, the intro paragraph reads, "Welcome to Munchkin Land. Yesterday, The Wizard of Oz debuted at the Las Vegas Sphere. The AI-powered immersive 4D experience includes some changes to the classic film, like a re-recording of the original score, multi-sensory elements, and expanded visuals to fill up the screen. But we're pretty sure the house still falls on the Wicked Witch of the East because in Vegas, the house always wins." All right, some quick market updates. NASDAQ saw a bump of 0.53%. S&P saw a bump of 0.32%. Dow saw a bump of 0.16%. 10-year down -3 DPS. Bitcoin bumping up 0.25%, and Build-A-Bear up 14.43%. Not only did those stocks close on the green across the board yesterday, but S&P 500 hit a record high for the second consecutive day. The Dow also hit a record, and the Nasdaq just missed one. They were helped along by the Commerce Department, which announced the U.S. GDP grew by 3.3% in quarter two. More on that further down. And Build-A-Bear Workshop popped off after reporting earnings yesterday morning. The Stuffies maker beat forecasts and expected record results for the fifth year in a row, thanks to digital and global expansion efforts. And moving into another anniversary, today marks 20 years since Hurricane Katrina, one of the most devastating natural disasters in U.S. history, which first made landfall in New Orleans and continued on to batter the surrounding Gulf Coast. If I recall correctly, and other hurricanes have done this since, I believe, but I remember watching the news about that in middle school and seeing how Hurricane Katrina kind of came up and hit, went back into the ocean, gained more momentum and power, and came back for a round two. Just super devastating for New Orleans. The storm killed over 1,400 people and displaced roughly 1 million residents. Hurricane Katrina's damage to New Orleans was so massive that lawmakers at the time debated whether the city, in a precarious environmental spot to start with, was worth rebuilding. I can imagine hearing your government have to contemplate that. In the end, the federal government spent over $125 billion on recovery efforts to rebuild and reinforce flood infrastructure, making Katrina the country's costliest storm. I am not sure I've ever seen that word before. Costliest. There we go. I'm like, costliest. What is that? In the present day, though, New Orleans is one of the weakest employment markets in the country. Its three main industries, tourism, shipping, and oil and gas production, have been hemorrhaging jobs. More residents are leaving the city for opportunities elsewhere. The population of New Orleans has dropped 23% since 2000. It's the fastest loss of residents of any U.S. city of that size. And recall, New Orleans at least was a major media market. It's a huge place. So yeah, best of luck to New Orleans. There's more on this, of course. Be sure to subscribe to the Morning Brew for more information on this. Moving into the presenter of this iteration, which is Pacaso. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. Spelled Pacaso. For those of you who don't know, Pacaso is a technology-enabled marketplace for co-owning luxury vacation property. So if that's your realm, hit up Pacaso, again spelled Pacaso. They may not be trading on the Nasdaq, but Pacaso just reserved the ticker for PCSO, and you have until September 18th to invest. You're just going to want to go to invest.pacaso.com and you'll find the option there. Over 10,000 everyday investors have bought stock in Pacaso, plus big investors who previously backed companies like Uber and eBay before their IPOs were on board too. The reason why? Created by former Zillow exec Picasso brings co-ownership to the $1.3 trillion vacation home industry. They've made more than $110 million in gross profits in their short history, including 41% YOY growth last year alone. You can join their growth story, you can join the story basically by investing, but time is running short. Again, invest by September 18th, which will be in just a few weeks. Returning on a little headline from last episode, federal governor Lisa Cook sued Trump over her firing. She filed the lawsuit yesterday in Washington, D.C. federal court, calling Trump's efforts to remove her illegal and kicking off a fight over the Fed's independence. The suit focused on the Federal Reserve Act, which dictates that she could only be removed for cause, the parameters of which will likely ultimately be determined by the Supreme Court. The suit also claims Cook's due process was violated, as she was not given an opportunity to respond to the mortgage fraud accusations that Trump and said her termination was based on before he announced it. Cook's firing suggested the mortgage application in question contained a clerical error. So we will see what happens from there. Okay, moving on to other big news for tech. Microsoft struggles to quell protests over their Israeli contracts. A revolt is growing among some of the top tech talent of the U.S. Yesterday, Microsoft fired 2 employees who joined others in barricading themselves inside the company president's office this week. In the latest escalation of protests against Microsoft's business dealing with Israel, the protesters are affiliated with No Azure for Apartheid, a group led by current and former Microsoft workers that's been demanding the company end its contracts with the Israeli military and government since last May. The demonstrations ramped up in recent weeks with protests outside executives' homes and an encampment at Microsoft HQ, where police arrested 20 people. The actions followed an investigation of The Guardian and the Israeli-Palestinian publication Plus 972 magazine, which reportedly found that Israel uses Microsoft Azure to store recordings of phone calls by Palestinians that is then used to detect bombing targets in Gaza. That is horrible. Microsoft launched an investigation into these allegations earlier this month, reopening a chapter it recently tried to close. Microsoft said in May that it found no evidence of Azure being used to target civilians or cause harm in Gaza over an earlier report on the IDF's ties with the company. I've not been a big fan of Microsoft for a little while, mostly because of personal reasons. For instance, they, for no reason, locked me out of my main account that I had for over a decade 3 years ago, and they've locked me away from a lot of content that I purchased through them. Thanks, Microsoft. But this, much better reason to not like Microsoft. So, good luck, Microsoft. Anyway, let's see, some investment information. Investing is a journey, says this next article, titled Together with U.S. Bancorp Investments. And U.S. Bancorp Investments, an affiliate of U.S. Bank, understands that everyone's journey is unique. They'll connect you with an experienced virtual financial advisor so you can get hyper-focused on your goals. Virtual, not AI. Just to clarify. They will develop a plan to address topics like 401k rollovers, retirement, your portfolio, and more. Start today with the free consultation, and you can just hop over to usbank.com, and I believe it's within their wealth management category. You'll find that information. And some big news for rail fans. Amtrak rolls out fastest train in America. Yesterday was Christmas for rail fans and people in suits, as Amtrak launched a souped-up version of its high-speed Acela train that connects Washington, D.C. to Boston. New and improved, the next-gen Acela hits a top speed of 160 miles per hour compared to the 150 miles per hour of current Acelas, which until now were the fastest passenger rail option in the U.S. The upgraded train can fit 27% more passengers while offering more frequent service, free high-speed Wi-Fi on board, and a tilt system for a smoother ride. 5 trains are launched initially, with 23 more set to hit the rails by 2027. However, the next-gen Halas are more delayed than a Greyhound due to the pandemic and infrastructure challenges that derailed the planned launching in 2021. Meanwhile, Amtrak has been losing money. It spent $4.3 billion on operations during the last fiscal year, but brought in just $3.6 billion in revenue. The White House is pressuring the Uncle Sam-backed corporation to strive for profitability, and Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy praised the new Halas for moving it closer to the goal. Best of luck to Amtrak, I guess. So what else is happening? Intel has received $5.7 billion from the ownership deal struck with President Trump. The White House says the Commerce Department is still ironing out details of the agreement. Nike will lay off 1% of its corporate staff as part of a realignment, the company announced. Check that out. Walgreens was taken over by PE firm Sycamore Partners, and its shares will no longer trade on the NASDAQ. U.S. online shoppers are seeing an uptick in order cancellations due to the end of the de minimis exemption. The CEO of Pop Mart, the company behind Labubu's, is now richer than Peter Thiel. Ariana Grande announced she will hit the road with the Eternal Sunshine Tour in 2026. No one has won the Powerball Grand Prize yet. The Jackball on Saturday's drawing is $950 million, so best of luck to whoever's going to try for that. Okay, moving into the next segment of our Part 2 interview with Alan Halas. In this episode, we dive into the unique balancing act Alan has mastered, managing his role as at OnMilwaukee, which he was hired into sometime after developing Breaking and Entering, while also still running Breaking and Entering, and even hosting a local radio show. And this is the part I kind of mentioned that reminded me so much of being back in college, being, on App States, radio station, really missing how that world kind of opened me up to what I was really wanting to do with my life. Alan shares how he draws clear boundaries between platforms while still letting them overlap in powerful ways, and he opens up about the realities of juggling side hustles long before the gig economy became a buzzword. From interviewing Weird Al Yankovic during his lunch break at a bank job, which was a really cool story, to building Milwaukee's creative ecosystem, Alan's story is proof that discipline and passion can truly coexist. So check this out, part 2 of our Entrepreneur Spotlight with Alan Halas. Enjoy. Now, we talked a little bit about in your screening call, that, like, whether or not there is kind of a balance you have to make between what you put forth for OnMilwaukee and then what you put forth for Breaking and Entering. So is that a difficult juggle, or is it, for you at least, you understand it well enough to where it's pretty seamless?
For me, it's actually been pretty seamless as far as what lands on OnMilwaukee versus what lands on Breaking and Entering.
Gotcha.
I do find ways to kind of merge those worlds, but the larger scale things definitely go to OnMilwaukee, especially if they're happening in the Milwaukee area.
Yeah.
So things like concert reviews, major label artist, interviews, and things like that. Stuff that is super relevant to what's going on in Milwaukee goes to OnMilwaukee. But the more hyper local stuff, maybe some stuff that doesn't necessarily land in the most advertiser friendly of spaces, that can go to the more underground stuff, that can go to Breaking and Entering.
Yeah.
And I've been very fortunate this entire time that even before I worked at OnMilwaukee, I worked at another publication, that my editors have always been very cool about determining what lands where, has been left up to me entirely for the most part. So that's been really nice. And like being able to, the respect from both ends of it has been really cool, in the sense that I can, I know when something is maybe too big for my site and should be going to the bigger publication, as opposed to, and they know when something, if they trust my judgment on when something fits for Breaking and Entering only. So yeah, that has always been kind of nice. There's also a little bit of beauty in the sense that you can combine those two worlds a little bit too. So in addition to what I'm doing, I'm hosting a local radio show on Friday nights on FM 102.1 in Milwaukee. So that features bands that I would probably play or feature on Breaking and Entering, but I get to play them on the radio, and then the show ends up on OnMilwaukee. So like all of those worlds kind of come together in that format too.
Man, you remind me that reminds me so much of me being on college radio again. We had the format for the station up at App State was alt rock. Moving kind of at the time they were moving into that like active rock era. So it kind of blended into somewhere. So I'm like, I mean, I like Adele too, but I think she's a little too light for a rock station. But we got to do specialty shows too. Words. And man, I got to launch a metal show on there. It was my pride and joy. I missed it so much. But you talking about that, how the underground music gets to play through breaking and entering more, and you get to decide. You got the agency over that. It brings me back. I miss the live airwaves a lot. There's no small town radio where I live. Unfortunately, everything's in Charlotte, and of course Charlotte is super saturated. So I miss the airwaves so bad. But I love that. I love that for you though. But I was gonna ask too. So having worked with, and not that I want to put your bosses on the hot seat at all, but like working with two publications and having such a similar business yourself, have there been moments where like your teammates were like, "Hey, could breaking and entering yada yada yada?" And if that has happened, if that's not cool, if it has happened though, I'm curious about. Did that bring you to any moments of like, okay, how do I establish and maintain proper boundaries as an entrepreneur yourself, and maintain respectful boundaries between breaking and entering and then OnMilwaukee and then the other publication you've also worked for?
Sure. So for me, the one big overlap between all of the different, things that I work for is there's a music festival in Milwaukee called Summerfest. It used to hail itself as the world's largest festival, but it is still 3 weekends of music, Thursday, Friday, Saturday every year.
Yeah.
That does fall into all of those realms because there's hundreds of artists that play that thing. Breaking and Entering has coverage of the local artists, and then OnMilwaukee also gets coverage of all of the festival events that are happening. Not even just music, but like even like our dining editor covers the food that's at the festival, and we all of our writers get together to review concerts because there's so many happening in any given night.
Right.
So that is probably the one big overlap, and for me, I exclusively write for festival coverage like that to OnMilwaukee. But I've been fortunate enough to find some freelancers that come in, and I tell them whatever shows you want to review, that's your world. Like,
Dude,
you have a home there at Breaking and Entering that essentially is kind of like, I always tell my contributors that anything that you want to cover, if you're into it, if it's music that you like, I want you to make sure that you cover it on Breaking and Entering. Treat it like it's your own website underneath our umbrella. We just have the audience for you.
Yeah.
So like and oftentimes they're younger than me, so they'll cover shows that maybe I wouldn't be as keen to cover. And like it does end up being different content across the board. So thankfully it's never really been too much of a conflict of interest other than, saying like, hey, like my freelancer kids are going to go over here and do this thing. And then, I get to go do my thing elsewhere, and I can let them run it, and they've been really great about it. So it's been cool.
I did not think over a decade after my undergrad, I'd be like, you know what? I kind of wish I stayed in Illinois and then went to college in Wisconsin, because I'm like, I would have killed for that. I would have killed for that opportunity, man. That sounds so cool. And I'm actually, how do I say this? How do I say this? I am, vicariously through them thankful to you that you offered that kind of opportunity, because I don't hear about that enough. So it's really cool that you offer that. Now, similar to me, you have a communications degree behind you, and I'm curious about, before you even began to see momentum in your market for this kind of work, did my particular communications degree, since it was broadcast focused, did not really have the market research side handled. So I'm curious to know about the differences in yours, and if you already had those tools and how to scope out and figure out how to gauge the interest, or if that's something you had to learn in the moment.
Sure. It was definitely something I had to learn in the moment. So like you, I actually, my major technically was broadcasting and electronic communication. That was all one major, but it sounded great on a resume because it sounded like two. It sounded like a double major when you say it,
broad
right?
spectrum too, yeah.
Yeah, they've since changed that at Marquette to digital media, and honestly, that probably looks better on a resume too, because there's such a broad scope that covers, right?
Yeah.
As far as gauging market interest, I honestly didn't know what there was. I had to learn that in the moment for, if there was an appetite for Milwaukee music. At the time when we started breaking and entering, the majority of live music in Milwaukee, it seemed like, were cover bands. I know that there was probably some sort of, burgeoning music scene, but it really wasn't. I mean, it was so prevalent that there were cover bands at every festival, at every, little block party, everything that makes up the city. And now that's really changed, and I think breaking and entering is actually part of a component of that. There are certainly resources like, more adaptation of like local radio like WMSE in Milwaukee and Radio Milwaukee, which are two community powered stations. And that embracing of local music has definitely changed. But cool. When we started, it was cover bands playing all the time at these big festivals because that drew, and they knew that people would sell beer if they went to those festivals, and that would make money for them. And now there's been more of an embracing of the Milwaukee music scene, and I think it's partially because there are just more discovery platforms available like ours that people can find out about these artists rather than having to sift through at the time like CDs or streaming links or whatever and find what acts they thought were good. They can just kind of go to our site now and browse around a little bit.
Nice. Now, one of the things we talked about was your podcast, but also the kind of side hustle culture that there is out there, especially in what's now being called gig. Is it what it is? Gig. Wow, my words are failing me today. I think it's gig culture or something like that. But yeah, but this new phenomenon where a lot of people are approaching typical jobs with a very freelancer mindset, like they're not fully engaged. But of course, they're also, as much as I think that's a freeing mindset to have for people who got side hustles, there's probably also drawbacks. So from your point of view, and even from your own podcast, talk about from your perspective the saying today the importance of having a side hustle, what things to keep in mind when you balance multiple avenues like that.
For sure. And that's something that's been consistent with me pretty much my entire adult life, really. So I started breaking and entering when I was right out of college, first year out of college, like really running it as a daily platform. I was working at a bank at that time. I was a marketing manager for a bank for 7 years. So it was literally like working at the bank 9 to 5, but then on my lunch break I would have an interview scheduled that I would have to run out to my car and then go sit down, talk to a rock star or a celebrity or somebody, and then walk back into the office as if nothing happened. Like nobody else knew that I had just talked to like the lead singer of Everclear or like Weird Al Yankovic was my first celebrity interview, or some of the bands that were playing festivals and things like that. Nobody knew.
Right.
Managing time has always been a priority for me. But I think now everybody, because so many people work from home, so many people are so connected that, everybody has a side hustle and the world only continues to get more expensive. So people figure out ways to make money. I think we're going to see even more of that in, the next 5 to 10 years, especially with things like being able to just go live on like Whatnot and TikTok and sell things, So as we see that kind of grow and evolve, like just learning time management, learning organization, which was never a strong point for me, learning those things and then figuring out how to make things function and how to move smoothly has been super crucial for me. Even now, like there's a lot of things that I do that are automated processes now that would have, even when I started the website, been a completely bimanual thing, hand assembling, whether that's writing posts or creating marketing materials. Like there's a lot of things that I have to do now that I have to automate just to, make time available for things.
But yeah, 100%. And with that, we'll bring this episode to a close. Thank you so much for being here with Casual Babble. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe, give us a like and a comment. It really, really helps out the show. It helps me to plan making the show bigger and eventually getting a studio space. That's my real goal, is to create a studio space truly meant for this show. So please, again, like and subscribe, follow us and give us a follow on anywhere that you're streaming this show. Connect with us on socials. Check out our linktree/Casual Babble. Check out our website, casualbabble.com. Subscribe there to our newsletter and just keep in contact. And if you follow me on linktree/BC Babbles, you'll see plenty of opportunities to support me and my goals for the show, whether or not it's buy me a coffee, whether or not it's PayPal or Cash App, or what else do I do? I think I also have, I think it's even Zelle's on there, I think. Essentially anything you can do to support the show and bring this entrepreneur-focused news landscape and interviewing platform to a whole new world. Greatly appreciated. So thank you again. We will see you tomorrow for the next and third iteration of this week's Entrepreneur Spotlight with Alan Halas. Thank you so much and have a fantastic day.